On a cold February night in 2004, 21-year-old Maura Murray vanished without a trace after crashing her car on a rural stretch off Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. A promising nursing student with a complicated past and a trail of secrets, Maura had emailed professors to excuse herself for a week, withdrawn money from an ATM, packed her dorm room, and disappeared into the White Mountains. Despite early witnesses, a brief law enforcement response window, and physical clues at the scene, no confirmed trace of Maura has ever been found. Her scent vanished within 100 feet of the crash. Her phone and credit cards were never used again. And in the absence of hard answers, speculation exploded into dozens of competing theories. In this episode, we begin our deep dive into those theories, starting with the most emotionally fraught and controversial, the possibility that Maura Murray ran away voluntarily and never looked back. There's a strange kind of gravity to certain disappearances, a pull that seems to get stronger over time as the absence of answers morphs into something deeper, a cultural fixation. Maura Murray's case is one of those black holes in the world of true crime. It didn't make national headlines when it first happened, but once the internet got a hold of it, the mystery grew legs, and those legs never stopped running. People say she was smart, independent, quiet, but capable. She was a former West Point cadet, a UMass nursing student, a long-distance runner, a young woman who knew how to handle herself, and still, just like that, gone. Her Saturn crashed into a snowbank on Route 112. The airbags deployed, a neighbor called 911, someone else stopped to help, and by the time police arrived less than 10 minutes later, Maura was nowhere to be found. No blood, no footprints leading into the woods. Her scent disappeared within a short radius. Her phone, dark. Her debit card and credit cards were never used again. Not once. In the vacuum of facts, something else took root. Possibilities. And they've only grown louder with time. Some people think Maura Murray was running to something. Others think she was running from it. Still, others believe she never had a chance to run at all. And among the most debated of all the theories, the possibility that Maura simply wanted to vanish, that she walked away from the life that she knew, and that for her own reasons, she's still out there. It's a theory that rubs people raw because, if true, it flips the story from tragedy to choice. It redefines her not as a victim, but as a fugitive of circumstance, or worse, a woman who left a trail of wreckage behind, emotional and otherwise. But even that's a kind of oversimplification because running away doesn't always mean escape. Sometimes it's a form of drowning. Sometimes it's survival. And sometimes it's desperation disguised as autonomy. What makes the Maura Murray case so hard to discuss, especially this theory, is the emotional fallout that it causes. For Maura's family, the runaway narrative has always felt like a cruel insult. For internet sleuths and Reddit theorists, it's a puzzle piece that almost fits, but not quite. And for the rest of us watching from the sidelines, it raises uncomfortable questions about how well we ever really know someone, especially when trauma and secrets are involved. In this episode, we're going to explore every corner of the runaway theory, not just what it would have required logistically, but what it would have meant emotionally, psychologically, and behaviorally. We'll look at who Maura was before that day, what was happening in her personal life, the paper trail that she left behind, and the subtle signs that something deeper might have been unraveling long before she got behind the wheel of that Saturn. We're not here to tell you what to believe. We're here to show you the patterns, the inconsistencies, the human psychology, the paper evidence, and we're here to ask the harder question. If Maura Murray wanted to disappear, would she have been able to pull it off? Let's start there. Hey, Angela. How's it going tonight?
Well, saving lives one day at a time.
Oh, I hear that. How's work?
Work's good.
Yeah.
Until people give my personal cell phone number out.
Oh, yes, that is.
I told her I was going to call her out on this.
Yeah, that's like a major no-no.
And it wasn't even to my client. It was to a different colleague's client. So it made it even sadder. But I told her I was going to call her out. So
she has been officially called out.
Called out. She will never do it again, she's assured me.
Oh, I'm quite certain of that.
I forgave her immediately. It was fine, but it happens.
It's one of those things that does just happen.
Yeah, it happens.
But we've got a heavy one tonight.
I know. That's why I was trying to giggle a little bit beforehand.
Yeah.
Try to get some of that to coat the palate, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, Maura's case always brings out strong opinions. If you have any doubt about that, listen to last week's episode, because I'm pretty sure that I made my opinions.
There's a lot of opinions, yeah.
Yeah.
You're not lacking in opinions.
Not ever.
But it's fine.
Yeah.
It's totally fine.
Diving into theory one, the idea that she ran away voluntarily, that's the one that really splits the room. It's emotional, it's controversial, and depending on how you interpret the facts, it either makes perfect sense or no sense at all.
Yeah, it's the kind of theory that makes people uncomfortable, because if you believe it's possible she just walked away, then you also have to believe she chose to leave everything behind. Her family, her future, her life, and that's not easy to accept.
Right. But the thing is, this theory isn't pulled from thin air. There are breadcrumbs, real actions Maura took in the days leading up to her disappearance. She emailed her professors, told them that there was a family emergency. There wasn't. She withdrew nearly all the money that she had in her bank account. She packed up her dorm room, mostly at least, and she printed MapQuest directions. She bought alcohol, and then she vanished.
All signs of someone planning something, but what? A quiet break from her life, a cross-state drive to clear her head, or something bigger? That's the haunting part. There are just enough details to support the idea she wanted to disappear, but not quite enough to prove it.
And then there's the crash, that final visible moment. Her car hits a snowbank on Route 112. A neighbor hears the thud and calls 911. A passing driver stops to check in. Maura says she's called AAA. She hadn't. He drives off. When police arrive just minutes later, she's gone. No footprints into the woods, no blood, just a car and a missing person.
I've always said if she did run, it was impulsive, because nothing about that spot screams ideal place to vanish. That area is remote, but not uninhabited. She didn't have a burner phone. She didn't take out a big cash stash. If this was a long-term plan, it wasn't airtight.
And that's exactly why we're breaking this theory down tonight. Not just from a practical standpoint, but from a psychological one. What would Maura have needed mentally and emotionally to pull something like this off? And more importantly, was she in that kind of a mindset? And I will also say that I tried very, very hard to write this episode unbiased. And so hopefully, because I do have an opinion, which I'll share later, but I tried to be as unbiased as possible. So hopefully that comes through.
I think you do pretty well.
And let the listeners kind of make their own determinations, but just throwing that out there.
So you know what I always come back to.
What?
The idea that sometimes people don't plan to disappear. They just want to run from the moment, from a mistake, from pressure. Yes, please. And once they're in motion, things spiral. That could have been what happened to her. A plan that didn't include vanishing forever, but ended in something irreversible.
Yeah, that's a powerful point. And we're going to look at all of that. Her timeline, her behavior, her last known movements, and similar cases where people did walk away from their lives and were found later, living quietly under the radar.
Because at the heart of this theory is something deeply human. Sometimes people break. They want out. Whether it's temporary or permanent, that instinct to run is real. The question is, did Maura actually do it?
So coming up, Angela's going to take us deep into the terrain of Haverhill, New Hampshire, because what Maura disappeared from isn't just some dot on a map. It's rugged, it's isolating, and it plays a massive role in how this theory unfolds.
And there's a lot people get wrong about that area, especially folks who've never been there. So let's paint the full picture. What it looks like, what the roads are like, and why it matters.
So let's get into it.
Let's do. Now that we have John's permission, let's talk about Haverhill, but this time with the specific lens. Not just where Maura was last seen, but whether the environment itself could have helped her disappear. We already know Haverhill, New Hampshire is small, tucked along the Connecticut River in Grafton County. The town has a population of under 5,000, scattered across forested land, old farmhouses, and rugged mountain corridors. But what matters most here isn't the population. What? Dang it. It's the geography. Route 112, also known as Wild Ammonoosuc Road. One of these days I'll get that right. Is where Maura's Saturn came to rest. And that road doesn't just stretch through a small town. It disappears into a mountain pass. What?
The Kankomegas.
Goodness sake, he gave me all the words this time. The Kankomegas Highway, the White Mountain National Forest, the edges of the... He was laughing already because he knew it was coming.
I think it's Pimagewasset.
I'm just looking ahead to see if there's anything else. Okay. The Kankomegas Highway, the White Mountain National Forest, the edges of the Pimagewasset Wilderness. Please don't come for me if I'm saying these wrong. This is where trails become logging roads, where old cabins sit dormant half the year, and where someone with even a basic survival plan could find space to vanish, especially in winter when tourist traffic drops and homes stand empty.
So for listeners who don't know the area, how isolated is it really?
It's one of those places that looks less remote on a map than it feels in person. Drive out 112 at night and you'll see what I mean. There are miles where you could lose cell service completely. No gas stations, no businesses, no major lighting. Just pines, snowbanks, and silence. The road winds in long curves between hills. A stranger walking away from a crash could disappear in either direction and reach an unoccupied structure within an hour. That matters when we talk about the runaway theory, because if Maura intended to vanish, if she planned to leave her car as a decoy and move on, this was a strangely perfect place to do it. Not convenient, not easy, but possible.
So you're saying geography might have enabled this?
Exactly. It wouldn't take a genius level plan, just knowledge of the area or research. Remember, she had printed MapQuest directions to Bartlett, New Hampshire and Burlington, Vermont. That suggests she'd been thinking about routes. Routes? Potato?
Yep.
And Haverhill sits at a crossroads. From there, you could hitch a ride north to Littleton, swing west into Vermont, or double back on side roads towards I-91. And with no cell towers actively pinging her location, it would be easy to go dark. Another thing, this isn't an area with a lot of security cameras. There were no ATM surveillance images past Hadley. No traffic cams along that stretch, no digital trail, and that's rare even for 2004.
So if someone wanted to go off the grid,
Haverhill would give them a window.
Gotcha.
But let's be realistic too. If Maura ran, she was doing it on foot, at least at first. There were no footprints found leading away from her car, but plow activity that night could have erased them. She had roughly a 10-minute window after the crash. If someone picked her up, planned or not, they could have pulled into one of the several wide shoulders or hidden driveways within sight of the crash site. Some are seasonal access roads. In summer, you'd spot cabins and old trailheads back there. In winter, you'd see a snow wall and maybe a set of tire tracks if you were looking in time.
But police didn't preserve the scene as a crime scene that night.
Right. They treated it as a single vehicle accident. No grid search that night, no dogs until the next day. That oversight, combined with the terrain, may have made a voluntary departure seem more plausible than it really was. But here's what I'll say. If Maura had help, someone who knew those roads, or a prearranged ride, then yes, she could have been out of the area before anyone knew to look.
Which keeps the runaway theory on the table, not because it's comforting, but because Haverhill, for all its quiet charm, could help someone disappear without much effort.
That's what makes it so haunting. It's not that the town hides secrets, it's that the landscape doesn't give them up easily.
So next up, we're going to look at who Maura really was in those final days, because if we want to understand whether she ran, we need to understand what she was running from. So stay with us. Before we can decide whether Maura Murray ran from her life, we need to understand what that life actually looked like, especially in the days and weeks leading up to February 9, 2004. This isn't a recap of what we've already covered in previous episodes. This is a deeper look, a more psychological one, because a decision to vanish doesn't just come from stress. It comes from buildup, fractures, a series of emotional and practical tipping points that begin long before the final drive. Maura was born on May 4th, 1982 in Hanson, Massachusetts. She was the fourth of 5 children in a working-class Irish Catholic family. Her father, Fred, was a medical technician, her mother, Lori, a part-time nurse. They divorced when Maura was in high school, a fact that left emotional echoes, though Maura rarely talked about it. From a young age, she was disciplined, independent, a runner in more ways than one. At Whitman-Hanson Regional High School, she dominated cross-country meets and earned near-perfect grades. Teachers described her as reserved but incredibly focused. Her sister Julie would later say Maura was the kind of person who internalized everything and refused to be anyone's burden. That mindset carried her to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. She enrolled in 2000 with plans to study chemical engineering. It was the kind of path that made sense on paper, elite, structured, future-oriented. But inside that system, cracks began to show. In 2001, Maura was caught stealing makeup from the commissary at Fort Knox, where she was undergoing cadet training as part of her West Point education. Though the value was minimal, the infraction constituted an honor code violation. At West Point, that kind of breach isn't just a personal failure. It's the end of the road. Rather than face formal disciplinary hearings and likely expulsion, Maura quietly transferred to UMass Amherst to study nursing. On the surface, It looked like a redirection toward a more grounded future. In reality, it may have been the first major fracture in her tightly controlled identity.
So you said that we were going to talk more about this because it's driving me nuts. Can we do that now?
Fine. Okay, so here is what I have been able to figure out about this. In the summer of 2001, Maura, then a 19-year-old cadet at the United States Military Academy at West Point, was undergoing field training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, as part of her cadet development program. Fort Knox, a major U.S. Army post, known for its armored warfare training and probably most well-known as the U.S. Bullion Depository. It hosts various military exercises, including those for West Point cadets. Maura, enrolled in West Point's chemical engineering program since 2000, was among the cadets sent there to gain practical experience in a structured, high-pressure environment. The incident occurred at the Fort Knox Post Exchange, or PX, a retail store on base that serves military personnel, their families, and authorized visitors. The PX offers a range of consumer goods from clothing and electronics to personal care items at tax-free prices, making it a common stop for cadets and soldiers. Have you ever been in a PX? So like every military base has a PX.
Yeah.
It's just basically a convenience store for the soldiers.
Right.
It's really what it is.
Yeah, I've heard, because I have lots of friends and family, but I've never been to one.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it's all it is a store. There's nothing fancy about them at all. But, you know, it's a store that, like I said, that it's tax-free pricing and stuff like that. And anybody can't go shop there. You have to have a military ID in order to be able to shop there. But other than that, that's all it is.
It's like the military Costco, but not as great.
It's like the military 7-Eleven.
This is at Costco because you have to belong.
Oh.
On a 7-Eleven scale.
On the 7-Eleven scale.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they're not huge. They're just like a convenience store. But yeah, you essentially have to be a member. So
members only. 7-Eleven.
Yes. So Maura, described by peers as disciplined and reserved, was navigating the rigorous demands of cadet life, which included not only academic excellence, but also adherence to West Point's strict honor code, which says, quote, "A cadet will not lie, cheat, steal, or tolerate those who do," end quote. According to limited public accounts, Maura stole a small amount of makeup. I heard it reported as a tube of lipstick from the PX. The exact value of the stolen items is not consistently documented, but sources estimate it was under $20, possibly as low as like $5, maybe even less. I don't know what a tube of lipstick ran in the early 2000s, but I mean, it's probably like $2.50, $5, something like that.
Don't look at me because I don't know now.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not girly enough.
I can't imagine it was very expensive at all. And the theft was not a sophisticated act. It was a minor shoplifting incident, likely involving slipping the item into her bag or her pocket before leaving the store. The PX at Fort Knox, like most military retail facilities, employed security measures typical of the early 2000s: uniformed staff, basic surveillance cameras, and loss prevention personnel. It's plausible Maura was caught by a store employee or security officer either during the act or shortly thereafter, possibly as she exited the store. Military exchanges are vigilant about theft due to their subsidized pricing and the expectation of integrity among service members. Shoplifting, even for a low-value item, is treated very seriously, especially for a West Point cadet subject to the Academy's honor code. Upon being apprehended, Maura was likely detained briefly by the PX security and questioned. As a cadet, her status would have prompted immediate notification of her chain of command at West Point. at Fort Knox and at West Point. The incident was reported to military police, who documented it as a misdemeanor theft. Given the low value, civilian charges were not pursued, but the violation was escalated to West Point's disciplinary system. Maura, as a second-year cadet or a sophomore, or at West Point would have been referred to as a yearling, faced severe consequences under the honor code, which views stealing as a fundamental breach of trust. The specifics of the disciplinary process are private, and that's per West Point's policies and the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. However, based on standard procedures outlined in West Point's Cadet Honor Code and System of 2001, Maura would have been subject to an honor investigative hearing. This involves a board of cadets and officers reviewing the incident, interviewing witnesses, and allowing the accused to present their defense. Maura, known for her reticence, likely offered minimal explanation, possibly admitting guilt to avoid prolonging the process. The theft, though minor in monetary terms, was catastrophic for her West Point career. The honor code is unforgiving. A single violation, especially stealing, often results in separation from the academy. Cadets found guilty face expulsion unless they resign voluntarily. Sources suggest that Maura chose to transfer out rather than face formal expulsion, a decision that preserved some dignity but marked a significant fracture in her identity as a high-achieving cadet. The incident's aftermath was swift. By late summer or early fall 2001, Maura withdrew from West Point and enrolled in the University of Massachusetts Amherst as a nursing student, starting in the spring of 2002. The transfer required her to relinquish her military scholarship, placing financial strain on her family, as Fred Murray, her father, later referenced in interviews. Maura rarely discussed the incident, even with close family, reflecting her tendency to internalize setbacks. The Fort Knox theft was not widely publicized at the time, as it was an internal military matter. It surfaced later, after Maura's disappearance on February 9, 2004, when investigators and journalists like my buddy Renner pieced together her backstory. The incident, though small, became a focal point in the runaway theory, suggesting a pattern of impulsive behavior under pressure. Critics, including Maura's family, argue that it's overblown, a youthful mistake, not a predictor of disappearance. Fred Murray emphasized in 2005 in New Hampshire Union Leader interview that the theft was, quote, a kid's mistake, not a crime spree. The event's significance lies in its psychological impact. For Maura, a perfectionist who thrived on discipline, the violation was a public failure in a system that demanded integrity. It forced her to leave a prestigious path, reshaping her trajectory. Such identity fractures, public shame, loss of status, can drive high achievers to withdraw or seek escape. While not evidence of running away, the Fort Knox incident offers context for Maura's mindset, hinting at a young woman grappling with self-imposed expectations. When asked by a friend following the theft why the hell she did that, Maura reportedly told her, quote, "I don't know. I had the money to pay for it." To me, this kind of makes me think of those goody two-shoes kind of kids that we went to school with.
Yeah.
And
you know who you are.
And they just want to try something.
Yeah.
You know, they just want to do something wrong just to see what it's like. Unfortunately, that does not describe me. When I was a kid, I wish I would have tried being good a little bit more often. But, you know, I see that as just a viable option here, that she was just like, I wonder what it's like to steal. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to take this lipstick. I'm just going to see what it feels like. You know what I mean? Like, you've been around those kids, you know, they have an opportunity to try a beer and they're like,
I'm going to do it.
I'm just gonna do
I'm
it.
going to do it.
And like all the rest of us are over in the corner doing keg stands, falling all over ourselves, making complete asses of
Whoever
ourselves.
did that, by the way.
Cake stands? I did. and these kids are like, I'm going to try a beer. I'm going to have a sip. And I'm not making fun of those kids because I wish I would have been one.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that just kind of is how this strikes me.
How it feels.
It's just like, I'm just going to do something really impulsive. And then her whole freaking world comes crashing down because of it.
She couldn't have chose the actual 7-Eleven.
Exactly. I mean, even that would have got her ass kicked out of
probably if it would have been found out.
If it would have been found out, but you're a lot more likely to get away with stealing from West Point than you are the Fort Knox PX.
Right? Oh, okay. So, in your opinion, does this play into her running away or having a reason to run away like Renner claims?
Well,
and I said his name correctly.
You did because you're nicer than me.
Because I'm leaving room for you to say your words.
So, trying not to foreshadow too much, but that is a good question. So, here's where I'm at with it. When you're in your teens and early 20s, time moves quickly. And
not as quickly as it does now.
Hear me out.
Okay.
So it moves quickly and it really does cover a multitude of sins. And what I mean by that is, when you're 19 years old and you do something, I don't know, you get a DUI, you get whatever.
Minor possession.
Name your dumb bullshit, whatever nonsense that we all did. Well, not everybody, but some of us. And
the colorful ones did.
Then by the time you're 21, 22, it's like eons ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a different person did it.
Yeah.
When you're my
age, I didn't do that. That wasn't me.
Yeah. I mean, when you're our age and you're, whatever, in your 40s, 50s, whatever, in order to get that same kind of distance from an event, you almost got to be talking about something 20 years ago.
Yeah.
When you're 20, it's like a couple years and it's like a whole nother lifetime ago. But then once you get older, you by the time you're 25 or something, you're pretty much the person you're going to be. You stop changing. And so it just becomes routine. And then not a lot of this kind of shit happens, hopefully, by the time you're past 25. But that's what I meant by that is it is different when you're younger, because the difference between being a freshman in high school and a senior in high school is like huge.
Yeah.
It's
like 20 freaking years.
It is.
Feels that way anyway.
Yeah. And so this incident, like I said, was in 2001. We don't know the exact date. Fort Knox and the military have the events of this shit very well locked down. So there's not a lot out there, but it was around July of 2001, and she disappeared on February 9th of 2004. So to believe that this incident would have anything to do with her running away, we have to believe that it was so huge that it was still seriously affecting her, 2 years and 7 months, almost 3 years after the fact. And I just find it impossible to believe that a minor shoplifting charge like this would somehow inspire her to disappear almost 3 years after the fact.
Yeah.
For me, I don't think it really factors into her disappearance at all. To suggest that it was just part of a long line of issues, as some, like Renner, would claim, requires a hell of a lot more issues that I don't know about. So we'll be playing devil's advocate a bit through the rest of this episode, but since you got me on this kick now, let's just go ahead and jump into it.
That's my job, right?
I suppose that is your job.
I feel like I read that in the fine print. Keep John on a soapbox, get him wound up, watch him go.
I guess that'd be up to our listeners. They'll let us know if you don't like me on a soapbox, and then, And then your job title will definitely change.
Then they'll come after me. Angela, damn it.
So
Calm him down.
So here's the list of issues that we know about and that have been claimed to have been those that led to her wanting to run away. So to start with, we have 2001 West Point enrollment, and then the Fort Knox theft. So we just talked about all of that when she stole the makeup, and this was claimed to have been a significant identity fracture for Maura, the perfectionist who thrived in disciplined environments. The public shame of leaving West Point, the prestigious institution, and losing her military scholarship placed financial and emotional strain on her and her family. The incident claims to establish a pattern of impulsive behavior under pressure, a key element in the runaway theory, as it suggests that Maura might have sought to escape consequences of the failure. But, I mean, I don't know. You can give me your opinion on all this, but I don't see it that way at all.
I tend to agree with you there.
And so then next we have 2002 to 2003. She's at UMass Amherst. That transition is now taking place, and she gets pinched for credit card fraud. So that's a little bigger deal.
A little bit, yeah.
So Maura is enrolled at UMass Amherst as a nursing student, working 2 jobs. She's working dorm security, and then she's also working in an art gallery. And she's maintaining her regimen. Her reserved nature persisted, with friends describing her as focused but private. And then in the fall of 2003, so around October, November, in that time, Maura used a stolen credit card number to order food from local restaurants totaling under $250.
Okay, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Do we know, did she steal it? Did she find it? How?
I don't know how she got the credit card number.
Okay.
I could not find how she got the number.
Because it makes me wonder if that's another one of those, I'm just going to do it. Like, I found it. It was laying there. Just gonna do it.
I have the same feeling.
So.
And I mean, there was absolutely nothing that I could find that she had stolen, that she had actually stolen the credit card. She just used the stolen number.
Right. So it was perhaps something found.
It could have been written down on a piece of paper.
That lady from Whataburger shared it with her?
Exactly. Yes.
To know that, you have to listen to our other podcasts.
That's exactly right.
Go back.
But, I don't know how she came across it.
Okay.
It's possible. It's plausible. And this I'm just pulling right out of my ass. But she worked campus security. So she was on patrol around the campus and stuff.
Okay.
It's possible that she came across a credit card on the ground,
or it was turned in.
It was turned in, yeah. Or somebody wrote a credit card number down on a piece of paper and it got dropped and she picked, who knows?
Right.
But she ordered food and she was caught and placed on university probation and told that the charge would be dismissed if she avoided further trouble. So this incident...
That was kind of lucky.
It was very lucky, but it's not that surprising to me, honestly.
No?
No, not really. I mean, she had, from everything I understand, she had stellar grades at the university. She wasn't a known troublemaker or anything like that. It does not at all surprise me if they were just like, especially if she made restitution, which it was under $250. So she probably immediately paid the money back. And then they were just like, rather than ruin your entire college career.
Your second college career?
Yeah. We're going to give you an opportunity here. Keep your nose clean. And this is just going to go away.
Got it.
So, and things can be handled a little bit differently on a college campus than they are out in the real world. Like,
yeah.
Similar to military. The military is a little bit more strict. Campus police, I imagine that, I don't know for an absolute fact, but I'm about 99.9% positive that UMass Amherst would have a campus police force, and they're actually law enforcement officers. They have full arrest authority. They carry guns. They're not security guards. They are full-on law enforcement. And if it would have occurred on campus, that would have been in their jurisdiction. They would have been in the investigating agency, and they're a little bit more inclined to give students a break as opposed to destroying their lives if there's reason to give them a break.
Gotcha.
And I suspect with her, they probably looked at her academic record, and she was also part of campus security. So maybe she kind of knew some of the officers that were doing the investigation and stuff. And they were like, you know what? We're not going to destroy your life. Pay the money back. Say you're sorry.
Don't do it
Keep your
again.
nose clean. And this will all go away after your probation.
Got it.
So this incident, again, I consider it a pretty minor one, but it added to her stress, and it risked academic and legal consequences for somebody already rebuilding after West Point. So the impact of that was the probation was another blow to Maura's self-image as the high achiever. For a perfectionist, the threat of another disciplinary mark could have felt overwhelming, I guess, maybe, especially given her prior West Point failure. But again, I gotta just keep coming back to this timeline. You know, if this was like in February, she gets booted from West Point, and then by April, she's getting busted for stealing a credit card. And then by June, she's wrecking her dad's car. Okay, so that's like a spiral.
Yeah.
That's like every month or two, we're having an issue. We're talking over a year between these incidents. I can't label that a spiral.
Right.
I just can't. You know, I mean, if it was a spiral occurring over like 3 years, but it was a continual process, continual.
Every time we turn around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that wasn't it at all. And nobody claims that was it. So I don't know where people get off calling this some spiral out of control, but they do. So the credit card fraud suggests that Maura was capable of secretive, risk-taking behavior. That I do agree with, potentially mirroring the covert planning that it would take to run away. It does add to the narrative of some mounting personal shame driving an escape. And then in early 2004, so again, the Fort Knox thing happened 2001. Then we have the credit card deal in 2003. And then now we're early 2004. Maura's long-distance relationship with Bill Rausch, a military officer stationed elsewhere, was strained. It had been reported that there was occasional infidelity on both sides and communication challenges. Maura rarely discussed these issues, as she chose to keep everything private. But the strained relationship did add some emotional pressure, particularly as Maura was already navigating some academic and personal challenges, maybe. Her reluctance to share these struggles aligns with the psychological profiles of voluntary disappearances, where individuals isolate themselves emotionally before acting. But I don't see that at all in her case. I see her kind of being like me, honestly. I'm just a private person. I don't share shit with people.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I'm struggling with something, I struggle privately. I don't. Mm-hmm. And there are people like that. I don't think we're weird. We're just geared a little bit different. So I don't know that necessarily means anything. And then February 5th, and then I also got to say about her and Bill's relationship. Again, we're talking about a couple of kids in their very early 20s trying to navigate a long distance relationship where he's in the military and stationed, I think, in Oklahoma during this period of time, but could be stationed anywhere. And I don't know. maybe their relationship made more sense when she was at West Point and they were both going to be in the military and this and that. But maybe by this point, it's not making a lot of sense for either of them. And
maybe
so
she tarnished him a little bit by getting kicked out.
Maybe, I don't know what was going on. I know that there was insinuations that he had cheated on her. I saw insinuations that she had cheated on him. I just see this as a relationship that in the heat of the moment, you think this is your long lost love and you're going to spend the rest of your life together. We were all in these relationships when we were younger. And then as it kind of works out, as things kind of shake out, it just kind of falls apart and you end up finding your real soulmate, hopefully, or whatever, get married, live long, and all that kind of stuff. But that's really what I see this. I don't see this as like some huge deal. I'm not saying that a 21-year-old girl isn't going to be upset if her, fiance's cheating on her or whatever, but there was the insinuation both ways.
Okay.
So I don't know that either of them were as committed to the relationship as they were earlier, if that makes sense.
It does. Gotcha.
And then February 5th, 2004, we have the emotional breakdown during her security shift. We talked about this in the other episodes where she received that phone call and was crying and visibly upset. And then the only thing that she would say is, "My sister." Mm-hmm. And there's been so much made of this call, but I don't know how you can make anything of it. First of all, we don't know for sure what the call was.
Yeah.
I did watch an interview with Kathleen that did say that she talked to her on that day and that in the conversation, she had let her know that she was drinking again. And like I told you, she was on medication and she wasn't supposed to be drinking. And this is said that, this was a contributing factor for her running away. But that makes no sense to me because, I guess I could understand the argument that you get busted for stealing from West Point or from Fort Knox, and then you get busted for the credit card thing. You wreck your dad's car, which we'll be talking about that. Those things could potentially be a trigger. Your sister needing help to recover from alcohol addiction, how does that inspire you to run away?
Yeah.
I have a really hard time with that one because
I don't think it does. It would inspire me to be like, come on, but not.
Yeah, pull your shit together, or I'm either writing you off. I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore, or we've got to get you into program. We got to get you some kind of help.
Yeah.
Both of those are very viable, and both of those are options that families take in those situations. I don't know that I've ever heard of a family member saying, "I'm going to run away and start a new life because my sister's an alcoholic." And I'm not trying to minimize the fact that Kathleen's an alcoholic and the impact that can have on a family, but I am trying to say, logically, why would that cause Maura to run away and want to start a new life?
Yeah. How is that making it better?
Yeah.
I think your sister's going to relapse harder.
Yeah. That's a weird one for me that I can't make the connection for.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have February 7th, 2004, and that's when she crashed her dad's Toyota. So after a party in Hadley, Massachusetts, Maura crashed her father's new Toyota Corolla into a guardrail on Route 9 at approximately 3:30 a.m., causing right around $8,000 in damage. No alcohol was cited, no charges were filed, but the incident occurred during Fred's weekend visit to help Maura shop for a new car. And I mean, he was pissed. He said he was upset.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about this in a previous episode, but as a dad, I can understand that, being upset. And this one, unlike the one for Kathleen, you could make an argument like this is just one more thing and I can't take it anymore. But to me, you got to take the Kathleen one out, in my opinion. And so when we break it all down into bite-sized chunks, we have the Fort Knox theft in 2001, the credit card fraud in 2003. So that's roughly 2 years and like 3 or 4 months from the Fort Knox theft. And then roughly 2 to 4 months later, in late 2003, early 2004, we've got the relationship strain with Bill Rausch. And then roughly 1 to 3 months after that, we've got the emotional breakdown during her security shift, the call from Kathleen. And then a couple days before her disappearance, we've got her crashing Fred's Toyota. And then we have the other stuff, packing up and the emails and stuff like that.
Right.
So that is kind of the timeline. And so, like I said, in my opinion, the Fort Knox shit needs to be thrown out completely. I cannot see how it could factor in almost 3 years before the fact. And then, like I said, we've also got to throw out the Kathleen thing, at least in my opinion, because it doesn't make sense that would cause her to want to run away. So sure, she may have still been thinking about like the Fort Knox thing, but to me, it's absurd to say that it figures into a reason for her to run away.
Right.
For me, it would have to be everything would have happened that fall.
Yeah.
To convince me that it was some big spiral and she just had to escape, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
So not enough to throw away all the lifelines and support systems and then take off on your own. None of this screams like I need to get away from my family.
Right.
I could see, like, in a situation like this, I could see a daughter going to her father and being like, Dad, I just need to take some time off from college, come home, regroup.
Yeah.
That happens all the
into
time.
the folds of the family, not disappear.
Nothing about this screams I need to disappear and totally eliminate all my lifelines, everybody that I know. And not only that, but we're expected to believe that a girl that was, quote, spiraling out of control somehow pulled off a perfect disappearance and then lived perfectly for the last 20 years. This is somebody that if you believe these bullshit theories, then you have to believe that she was like out of control. She fled from Fort Knox. That was like the beginning of her crime spree. Then she got her credit card and she's just so out of control that she's got to escape. And then what? She lives literally without a speeding ticket or anything.
Just 360 perfect.
Perfect. Because if she would have committed any serious crime, they would have discovered her identity.
Yeah.
So that's a hell of a big stretch for me to believe.
Exactly. But that's something a lot of people miss when they talk about this runaway theory. It's not just about the pressure, it's about the identity collapse. So when someone's entire self-worth is tied to achievement and that foundation gets shaken, even once, it can create this deep gnawing shame that kind of makes you question everything, even your ability to start over.
Right. So we'll continue.
Sorry.
We'll continue then to play the devil's advocate. That's what I committed to do with this episode. So We'll get back to that. So even though you all know, obviously, where I stand on this theory, Angela got me to let the cat out of the bag early.
Yes.
Backing up to Maura Murray, to Maura switching to UMass, she wasn't just switching majors. She was redefining who she was under pressure whilst trying to stay ahead of everything that was quietly unraveling. So at UMass, she held 2 jobs, one as a dorm security monitor and another at the campus art gallery. She ran, she studied, but by late 2003, she made another impulsive decision. And, a lot of this is, we kind of got off on a tangent, so we're going to do a little bit of repeating here.
Yeah.
And she stole those credit cards and was placed on probation for that. So that sounds minor, but to somebody already holding herself to a military grade standard of self-control, it could have felt like another collapse, another identity breach. And then in 2004, things get worse with Bill Rausch. He's in the military station far away. The relationship, like we've said, was strained. Friends said that she'd been unusually quiet, even distant. And on February 5th, she received that weird-ass phone call, which I believe it was Kathleen. I think I've made that clear.
Yeah.
And so, but some speculated that it was Kathleen and that it had to do with her relapse, but others believe that it was a call from Bill. Now, I've watched the interview with Kathleen. She says that she talked to her on that day and that she divulged that she was drinking. So it seems to be a pretty damn strong fit. Mm-hmm. But whatever it was, it may have triggered something profound. Her supervisor had to walk her back to her dorms. I mean, she was very upset about this, whatever it was. And it was one of the last moments anyone saw Maura visibly emotional.
So, and like we said, that we're backtracking a little bit. 2 days later, another crash. On February 7th, she wrecked her father's brand new Toyota Corolla after leaving the party. She hit a guardrail on Route 9 in Hadley, Massachusetts at around 3:30 a.m. And her dad had come to visit that weekend and she'd just borrowed his car. Like we said, the damage was extensive, over $8,000, but again, no alcohol was cited. So Maura spent that Saturday with Fred shopping for a new car. They had dinner. They seemed fine, normal. They made plans to talk again on Monday night, and that call would never happen.
Yeah, and let me just remind everybody, when we say over $8,000 worth of damage, today, that doesn't mean much.
No.
In 2004, that was a lot of freaking money.
20.
Because
15, 20.
Most of your cars were like 20 grand.
Yeah.
And like the Toyota might have been like 25 or 30 grand.
I was just realizing the other day that you can't even like find an old janky first time driver $5,000 car anymore.
No, hoopties are like a thing of the past.
Yeah.
I know.
You cannot find that.
And you look for like the old Chevy trucks and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And they're like $30,000 freaking dollars.
Yeah.
It's insane. But, you know, so just to kind of put that in perspective, you know, $8,000 when you're driving a $150,000 Ford F-250, not a very big deal. I mean,
right.
You could replace a freaking one little fender panel or something like that, and it's going to cost $8,000. But a Toyota Corolla in 2004, $8,000 is probably almost totaled.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, but getting back, so they plans to talk in that Monday night, but it never happened. Instead, on Monday, February 9th, Maura began a chain of behavior that no one has ever been able to fully explain. So she sent an email to her professors claiming that there had been a death in the family. And like we've said, there was no death. She called a condo owner in Bartlett, New Hampshire, and another number linked to a resort in Vermont. She withdrew almost all of the money that she had in her bank account, $280, and went shopping for alcohol, and then she left. She didn't tell her roommates. She didn't text her sister. She didn't confide in her best friends. What she did do was pack her 1996 Saturn, textbooks, a week's worth of clothes, her accident forms, toiletries, a stuffed animal, according to some accounts, and a printed email to Bill.
So that part always gets me, the printed email. It is such a deliberate thing to choose that one message and leave it out in the open. Was it a goodbye, a guilt offering, breadcrumb? We just don't know. But it tells us that she was trying to communicate something, maybe just to him, but maybe to whoever found her car.
Maybe. But so again, I find myself in diverging from investigators and theorists a lot. So take whatever bullshit I had to say with a grain of salt because it's just me. But
slice of lemon and a shot of tequila.
I also remember this period of time where we all didn't have laptops.
Mm-mm.
And I remember printing out multiple emails. I mean, even still, if I have much to read, I print it out. I have a hard time reading on a computer screen.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't do like Kindle. I don't read books on, I want the paper in my hand. But at that period of time, it was common for me to print out an email and read it. And if it was like, of course, I was married during that period of time. So, I wasn't getting a lot of emails from lovers or whatever. But if it would have been like a love letter type of thing or something, I could see if I'm kind of a sentimental type. So
yeah,
I might hold on to a love letter and I might like read it multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I'm the only person in the world that does that kind of stuff. And so if this was something that I don't know what the email said, but if this was something that was along those lines and she was planning to just take some time and get away for a few days at some resort or whatever, I could see her printing out that email and just being like, I want to reread this, when I'm by myself and I don't have all of this stress or whatever. Yeah. I want to read into this email. And because we know that they were having problems or something, maybe he was like, maybe we need to take a break, maybe whatever. I don't know. But maybe she wanted to print it out and reread it for her own self. And this wasn't when we all carried computers in our pocket.
Yeah.
In 2004, you weren't getting emails on a phone.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't strike me as that odd. Now,
it would be odd.
Odd. It would be odd. Because honestly, we all have our emails on our phone. And I could go to probably any freaking hotel and most Airbnbs and print it right from my phone if I wanted a printed copy.
That's true. I was thinking that maybe if you thought you were going to end up camping or in a place that
with
service or battery, you would want to print it just so you could reflect on it.
Yeah. But she has the printed MapQuest directions and this email. So to me, it doesn't strike me as that odd because I remember that time so well. That was really during this transition from the paper world to the digital world. And it took a lot of us, probably most of us, a little bit of time to make that transition. And some of us still haven't completely. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents on that email. Why it does seem odd. You got to wonder if it seems odd in 2025 eyes or if it would have still seemed odd in 2004 eyes.
Yeah.
And to me, having a printed email at that time period wasn't odd because it was something that I had often.
Yeah, same, probably. I can picture that. Yeah.
So I don't know. But so she hit the road sometime after 4:30 p.m. driving north. No one knows for certain where she was headed. Her MapQuest directions were for Burlington and Bartlett. One is a ski town and one is a college town. But we have no clear destination, just cold roads, paper maps, and silence. And then the crash at 7:27 p.m. on Route 112. The conversation with Butch Atwood, the vanished scent trail, the empty car, was it all premeditated or is it the final domino in a long line of emotional freefalls?
Because here's the thing. Maura wasn't fragile. She was private, like John.
Yep.
And there's a difference. She didn't share, she didn't vent, she endured. And for some people, that endurance becomes a kind of prison. So the runaway theory doesn't just suggest escape, it suggests a silent plea for autonomy.
So that's what we're left with. A young woman under pressure, full of contradictions, achieving and unraveling maybe at the same time. Someone who had the tools to survive, but maybe not the space to breathe. So if she ran, it wasn't cowardice, it was strategy. If she vanished, it wasn't just impulse, it was accumulation. And if we want to keep her story honest, we have to sit with that complexity. So again, Monday, February 9th, 2004, 7:27 p.m., a call comes in to the Grafton County Dispatch. A single vehicle crash has been reported along Route 112, also known as Wild Ammonoosuc Road, just east of Swiftwater, New Hampshire. The call is Faith Westman, a local resident who glanced out her window inside dark-colored vehicle, nose first into a snowbank. From her vantage point, she says she saw someone, a woman, moving about the car. No obvious distress, no calls for help, but it looked off. The vehicle was a black 1996 Saturn sedan. The driver, presumed to be 21-year-old Maura Murray, was nowhere to be found when the first officer arrived. Between the 911 call and Officer Cecil Smith's arrival at 7:46, roughly 19 minutes had passed. And in those 19 minutes, Maura vanished.
And that window, those 19 minutes, has become the center of so much speculation because it's just long enough for someone to leave, just long enough for someone to be picked up, or, if you believe this theory, just long enough for someone to disappear entirely by choice.
So we've covered the timeline before pretty extensively. We've walked through the crash, the witnesses, and the terrain, but tonight we're reframing it through one lens. What if Maura ran away? Voluntarily, strategically, on purpose. Because it's not just about that car in the snow. It's about what she may have been running from and what she may have been trying to run to. So let's look again at the facts, but this time let's filter them through the possibility that Maura Murray planned to disappear.
Okay, so her Saturn wasn't in great shape. It had known mechanical issues. She'd packed it with some of her belongings, textbooks, clothes, MapQuest directions to Burlington, Vermont, wine. Her phone and wallet weren't found. Neither were her backpack. If you were planning to vanish, wouldn't you bring the essentials? The things that could help you start over or stay hidden?
Exactly. And what about the email that she sent to the professors claiming that there had been a death in the family when there hadn't? That message gave her academic cover to leave campus. She then withdrew the $280 from her bank account, nearly everything that she had to her name, and then bought alcohol. To some, that looked like she was preparing for isolation. To others, it looked like supplies for the road.
To me, it seems weird if she's upset that her sister's drinking and she buys a crap ton of alcohol.
See, that doesn't really strike me as that odd, honestly. But it could be because I'm a drunk. So there's that.
Former
drunk. What's a drunk? Always a drunk. But, if you don't have that problem, or maybe Maura did. Maybe, she had that. I don't know. But
maybe that's why it affected her so much.
Maybe. But, if you don't struggle with that, then it's a perfectly reasonable thing to grab some wine and you're going to go off and relax for a few days and just clear your mind or whatever. It doesn't strike me as all that odd that you're going to do some drinking while you're there. That's just me.
Okay.
But
okay. Well, so let's not forget about the crash she had just 2 days before when she wrecked her father's car. That, on top of a recent disciplinary issue and relationship stress, could have added pressure to make a break. But this wasn't a frantic last-minute escape. It had traces of premeditation.
So Atwood offered to call the police, and she declined. She told him that she already had AAA on the way, even though there was no cell phone reception. And if she was trying to buy time before someone showed up, that lie does make sense, because it buys her a few more minutes. A scent trail from a police dog ended 100 yards from the crash site, near the road. No footprints leading off into the woods, nothing frozen into the snow. One possibility, she got into another vehicle.
And that fits a runaway scenario, not just someone who panicked and fled into the night, but someone who had coordinated a pickup, a friend, a stranger, a prearranged ride she didn't tell anyone about.
So the runaway theory hinges on a few pillars: preparation, emotional motivation, and most importantly, absence of foul play indicators. No blood, no signs of a struggle, no forced entry, just an abandoned car, a confused community, and a missing person. But the theory also demands we reckon with her past, a history of silent endurance, a tendency to compartmentalize, a near-perfect student who broke under invisible weight, and instead of asking for help, opted to vanish.
The initial police response didn't help. They assumed she'd run. They didn't preserve the scene. They didn't escalate it as a potential abduction, but maybe they were closer to the truth than anyone wants to admit. Maybe Maura did leave on her own.
By February 10th, search efforts began. Canine units, aerial teams, and volunteers, but the damage was already done. No solid leads, no trace of her movements, just silence. What if that silence wasn't tragedy, but intention?
This theory isn't easy to accept. It forces us to see Maura not as a victim in the traditional sense, but as an agent of her own escape. If that's true, it doesn't mean she wasn't in pain. It means she didn't see any other way out.
So let's be honest. Runaway theories don't always sit well with the true crime community. It's uncomfortable. It strips the case of its mystery, its menace, even its drama. It says, maybe this young woman just left, that maybe no one else was involved. But the runaway theory in Maura Murray's case isn't some casual shrug of the shoulders. It's not a lazy theory. It's plausible, supported by her behavior, the timeline, the objects left behind, and the deafening silence that followed. To believe Maura ran away, we first have to accept that she may have been deeply, privately struggling, and everything we know about her final weeks suggests that might be true.
And John, I think it's important to say running away doesn't mean Maura wasn't a victim. She may have been a victim of emotional collapse, of overwhelming expectations, or of a life that felt like it was closing in. Sometimes survival doesn't look like strength, it looks like escape.
Exactly. So let's lay out what supports this theory. So first, premeditation. Maura didn't just vanish out of nowhere. She took specific intentional steps in the days leading up to her disappearance. She packed clothing, toiletries, school materials. She emailed her professors about a family emergency, giving her cover. She printed MapQuest directions to Burlington, Vermont, and called a condo owner in Bartlett. Her dorm room, with wall art removed and some belongings boxed, suggests that she planned a permanent departure, possibly, not just a temporary break. And she withdrew that $280, nearly her entire bank balance, at 3:40 p.m. on February 9th. She picked up the alcohol. She didn't say goodbye to her roommates. She didn't check in with friends. She didn't mention it to family. That silence, it wasn't forgetfulness. It was by design.
There's something very deliberate about it. Like, she knew not to leave too many threads, but not in a criminal way, in a self-protective way. No digital trace, no predictable trail, no dramatic departure. She wasn't trying to make a statement. She was trying to disappear quietly.
Yeah, so let's talk about the emotional motivation. The runaway theory is strengthened by what Maura was carrying psychologically. And We've already gone through all of this, but we've got the West Point thing. We've got the stolen credit cards. We got her issues with her boyfriend, her crash of her dad's car. And then on February 5th, we've got the strange call, which it obviously left her shaken, but is all she could say is my sister. So whether it was Kathleen's relapse or another trigger, it just deepened her distress. And that's a heavy cocktail of guilt, shame, and internal pressure. Maura was someone used to perfection. When her image cracked, she didn't reach out, she recoiled.
And she didn't want to be seen falling apart. She had that high achiever mask. If you've ever known someone like that, you know. They're the last to ask for help, the first to disappear when things go wrong.
And that brings us to the logistics. How would she pull this off? A scent trail ended 100 yards east along Road 112, suggesting she may have entered a vehicle. We know it wasn't snowing heavily that night, and temperatures were below freezing, so footprints or trail marks should have lasted. She had a backpack, possibly her wallet, a phone that was never recovered. With $280 in a backpack, she could have arranged a ride through a discreet contact, maybe, possibly using cash to secure transport or lodging off the grid. Maura was smart enough to create plausible deniability.
And she wouldn't have needed to tell anyone, not a single soul. If she was desperate enough to run, she may have felt the need to protect her escape, even from the people who loved her.
And then there's what we haven't found. There's been no confirmed sighting, no confirmed remains, no phone records, no debit card activity, no social security usage. To many, that's proof that she meant foul play, but to others, it suggests something else. Maura may have crossed the border, lived under a new name, built a different life. There are survivalists who do it. Women fleeing abuse, people shedding their identities like old skin. And remember, this was 2004. Pre-Facebook saturation, pre-mass surveillance, no Ring cameras, no global tracking.
And if you want to disappear, Vermont, New Hampshire, Quebec, they offer a kind of rural voids that swallow people whole.
And of course, there are holes in the theory. No witnesses reported seeing her get into a car. No camera caught her at the Canadian border. And no family member ever heard from her again. Not even anonymously. But here's the hard truth. None of those details disprove it either. They only make it harder to accept.
We want an answer that points to someone, a suspect, a villain. But what if the only person Maura needed to escape was herself?
Maybe she didn't vanish into the darkness. Maybe she stepped into the unknown to finally breathe. So when Maura Murray disappeared on February 9, 2004, the initial law enforcement posture was unambiguous. She left voluntarily. That assumption guided the early hours of the investigation, and in many ways, it shaped every step that followed. So tonight we're focusing on that core idea, one of the most debated theories in her case, that Maura Murray ran away on purpose, of her own volition, and perhaps with a plan. We're not here to say that's what happened, but we are going to follow the evidence and the investigative trail as if that theory is worth testing, because for many, it still is.
And John, part of what makes this so difficult is that a voluntary disappearance is the kind of outcome that doesn't always leave behind a neat forensic trail. Sometimes it's defined more by what's missing than what's found.
Yeah, so let's take a look at what was found. Let's start with the scene itself. Maura's black 1996 Saturn. It was found lodged against a snowbank off Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. But it wasn't abandoned in a careless way. The car was locked, the airbags had deployed, and most critically, Maura herself was gone. Inside the vehicle, Investigators found a number of items. Some were seized at the scene, others turned over to family, and then re-seized in June 2004 after a procedural correction. What was inside the car, according to those police reports, paints a much fuller picture than we previously had. So here's a comprehensive inventory of what was found in Maura Murray's Saturn after the crash. So we have a green Tundra garment bag, a Tic Tac container opened, an ESPN Zone card, multiple prepaid phone cars. Remember those?
Mm-hmm.
A Samsung phone charger and other AC adapters, black and white Puma sweatpants, a black Express long sleeve polo shirt, a black sports bra, a black Old Navy V-neck sweater, white Abercrombie and Finch pants with a black belt, a black zip-up Old Navy sweatshirt, white basic sneakers, a pink sock with a cartoon cow design, a pale blue 34A bra, 75 cents in coins, a black and gold Army track duffel bag, a health professional drug guide, a green Mead spiral notebook, UMass medical history questionnaire, a Vermont tourism map, a copy of Mosby's Pharmacology and Nursing, an unopened jar of kosher dill pickles.
Interesting.
Right. An open bottle of Diet Cherry Coke, an open package of Twizzlers, Big Y tokens, a cosmetic pouch with makeup, a toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, shampoo, hair products, lotion, nail polish, several opened and unopened packs of Simply Sleep, trifazole birth control with 4 pills missing, a Not Without Pearl book, multiple cassettes including U2 and in Led Zeppelin. She had good taste in music. A JVC portable CD player with 34 CDs, a photograph of her brother Curtis, a U.S. Military Academy patch, maps, road atlases, handwritten directions, a funnel, radiator fluid, tire gauge, fix-a-flat, rubbing compound, and other automotive supplies, and various pens, pencils, personal items, snacks, and toiletries.
They specifically say the Twizzlers, the Coke, the pickles, but everything else is just snacks.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's not the packing list of someone headed out for a brief breather. That's a personal catalog. Books, entertainment, hair products, snacks, medications, birth control, phone cards, even a photograph of her brother. Some items were for comfort, others for survival. What don't you see in that list? A phone, wallet, keys, or backpack. All of those were missing from the scene.
And there's no indication those essential items were stolen. There was no broken windows, the car was locked, no blood was found, no signs of a struggle, no foreign DNA. The implication is clear. Maura left on foot, or more likely left the scene willingly in a vehicle with only her most vital belongings in hand.
So let's talk about what happened next. The first real organized search didn't start until the following day, February 10th. But even then, it was limited in scope.
Canine units picked up a scent trail that traveled east along Route 112 for about 100 yards and then abruptly ended. That suggests that Maura may have gotten into another vehicle, possibly one that she arranged in advance. What stands out is that police didn't canvass passing drivers. They didn't pull CCTV from nearby towns. Granted, there wasn't much to pull in 2004, and it didn't issue a BOLO for a second car. The assumption that she left on her own may have actually shut down the kind of investigative urgency needed to pursue other scenarios, even those consistent with a runaway.
Over the next 2 weeks, the search expanded. Helicopters, dogs, volunteers, dive teams, but no sign of Maura. No clothing, no backpack, no footprints in the woods, No trail leading away. That absence of evidence, that vacuum, actually strengthens the case that she got into a car. Because if she walked, she likely would have left some trace.
And that's the paradox. People who plan to disappear, truly disappear, don't usually walk into the woods in the middle of winter without gear. They get picked up. They take a ride. They vanish in a way that leaves others wondering if they were ever there. And across the nearly 2 decades that followed, despite tips, speculation, and advanced search methods, no verified trace of Maura or her belongings has ever been found. We also have the digital evidence. Maura's final computer activity included MapQuest searches for directions to the White Mountains, including Burlington and Stowe, Vermont. She also placed calls to the area lodging. At 12:55 p.m., she contacted a Bartlett, New Hampshire condo rental, and at 2:05 p.m., she dialed a lodging facility in Stowe, Vermont. At 3:40 p.m., she withdrew $280, nearly her entire bank balance, from an ATM. By 4 p.m., she had purchased alcohol at a nearby liquor store, and then she vanished.
And after that, nothing. No emails, no phone pings, no debit card use, not one login, one call, or one pinged tower. It's like her entire digital signature was wiped clean.
This was 2004. GPS tracking wasn't universal. Phone records weren't as meticulously logged or accessible in real time, and CCTV wasn't embedded in every gas station and toll booth like it is now. It was possible in that window of time to disappear if you were willing to leave everything behind. No social media, no selfies, no breadcrumb trail of GPS directions or data logs. That version of digital anonymity is all but extinct now, but back then, it could be done.
And it's worth noting, if she had help, if there really was a tandem driver, she could have gone far by sunrise.
So now let's shift from the physical evidence to the psychological. Could Maura have done this? Could she have run?
That's where the runaway theory still divides people, because on the surface, Maura was accomplished athlete, cadet, nursing student, but under the surface, she'd been disciplined at West Point for stealing makeup from Fort Knox, an honor code violation that led to her quiet transfer to UMass. She was on probation for credit card fraud. She'd just crashed her dad's car 2 days prior, causing over $8,000 to $10,000 in damage. And that February 5th call, whatever was said, left her sobbing at her security desk saying only, "My sister."
We also know that she wrote an email to professors that Monday morning claiming that there was the family death, that there wasn't. The lie may have been a cover story to buy time, and she boxed up some of her belongings, took down wall art, left a printed email from Bill Rausch about relationship troubles in plain view. These don't feel like the actions of someone taking a short break. They suggest preparation, transition maybe.
Add to that her personal style. People described her as private, self-contained. She didn't ask for help, didn't confide. If she was struggling, no one really knew how deep it went.
The theory goes, maybe this was the ultimate escape valve, a fresh start in another region, another country, a new identity. We've seen it before. Elizabeth Greenwood's book, Playing Dead, documented how easy it was to disappear before the age of constant surveillance. And dipshit James Renner, in his controversial investigation, suggested Maura may have planned a new life to escape mounting pressures, academic, legal, emotional.
Of course, for that to hold water, she has to stay gone. Through her mother's illness, through her family's grief, through years of searching and heartbreak.
And that's the part that just doesn't sit right. Not just with her family, but with people like us who want this theory to be airtight, but find it full of contradiction. Still, it remains plausible, if only because nothing else is proven more likely.
So what are we left with? A locked car, a vanished woman, packed bag, a digital trail that stops on a Monday afternoon in February, and 2 decades of silence.
Maybe she planned it perfectly. Maybe someone helped her disappear, or maybe this was a desperate act that unraveled into something darker. But if Maura Murray ran away, she did it with a precision that most of us couldn't even begin to fathom. And that's what makes this theory, controversial as it is, impossible to just fully dismiss.
Next, we'll dig deeper. What would it have taken to pull off this escape? What psychological patterns match Maura's case? And are there others who've done it? Because when it comes to disappearing on purpose, some people make it look effortless.
So we've walked through the timeline, we've dissected the forensics, we've explored the search efforts, psychological patterns, and police assumptions. Now we're going deeper. This segment is dedicated entirely to one of the most polarizing possibilities in Maura Murray's case, the idea that she chose to disappear. The runaway theory isn't just an internet rumor. It's a documented possibility, investigated by law enforcement in the early days, exploited by journalists like James Renner, and debated relentlessly in online forums, podcasts, documentaries, and Reddit threads for nearly 2 decades. We're not here to sensationalize it or to endorse it. We're here to break it down piece by piece as methodically and honestly as possible.
And let's be clear, just because something is possible doesn't mean it's probable. Saying Maura might have chosen to leave isn't the same as saying that's what happened. This theory deserves scrutiny, not blind belief. We owe that to Maura, to her family, and to the facts.
Right. There's an important distinction to be made between advocating for a theory and interrogating it. One of the ethical obligations that we carry as podcasters, especially in true crime, is to avoid building narratives around our own biases or agendas. We don't get to decide what the truth is. Our job is to try to uncover it, even when that means sitting with uncomfortable ambiguity. And this theory is uncomfortable for a lot of reasons. It implies Maura was capable of cutting all ties to her family and friends, including during times of deep distress, like her mother's illness and eventual passing. It suggests a level of premeditation, cunning, and emotional resolve that's hard for many to imagine. But some of the evidence aligns with that possibility. Her packed car, the false email to her professors, the MapQuest printouts, the lack of digital footprints afterwards.
But there are also parts of this theory that rely too heavily on speculation, or worse, on assumptions that don't hold up under pressure. Like James Renner's repeated claim that Maura may have been fleeing from abuse in her family, particularly from her father. That's an accusation with no verifiable evidence and no public support from Maura's siblings. It's reckless to include something like that without acknowledging the harm it causes and the vacuum of proof.
Exactly. And we spent a whole episode on Renner.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about him a little bit more in this episode, including that now infamous anecdote about the Canadian record store clerk and the age progressed photo. But first, we're going to take a hard look at the actual foundation this theory is built on. What's the evidence? What does the car inventory say? What do psychological patterns tell us? Could someone like Maura, smart, capable, emotionally complex, actually disappear in 2004 and stay hidden until 2025? Because that's where we are now, 21 years later. If Maura ran, She has stayed gone longer than most adult voluntary disappearance cases on record. And if she didn't run, then every moment spent chasing this theory is a moment not spent chasing the truth. That's why it matters to get this right.
So let's strip it down. Not hype, no tunnel vision, just the facts. What really supports the idea that Maura Murray disappeared of her own free will, and what still doesn't add up.
So when people speculate that Maura Murray ran away, they often point to what she left behind and what she took with her. And there's no better place to start that conversation than with her car. Maura's black Saturn was found partially off the road on Route 112, locked, airbags deployed. We've talked about all that. It wasn't just a scene, it was a time capsule. And according to police documents returned to Kathleen Murray in June of 2004, the items retrieved from that vehicle form a detailed record of what Maura brought with her, and perhaps more importantly, what she didn't leave to chance. So let's go through some of that list, not just the highlights, but the overlooked, humanizing, and maybe even strategic details.
And it's not a small list, John, which I'm sure you know.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking dozens of items, some practical, some seemingly random, like a jar of pickles.
Right.
Which, I mean, dude, enjoy pickles, but why are you taking a whole jar with you? And some deeply personal. This wasn't a teenager on a spring break. This was someone who appeared to be preparing for a long absence. A green tundra garment bag, a black and gold army track duffel bag, multiple pairs of shoes and clothing items, Abercrombie and Fitch pants, Old Navy sweaters, sports bras, Puma sweatpants, not flashy, but functional.
Yeah, and I do just got to say here, I know I've said this before, but I'm the brother of 3 sisters.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the father of 3 daughters.
Mm-hmm.
I've been married. To me, this sounds like pretty light packing for a weekend getaway for a woman. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't mean that in an insulting way, but I mean, I've traveled with women that bring half their freaking wardrobe with them and all of the bathroom. So, I mean, to say that, and
Anybody with a jar of pickles, though?
yeah, I mean,
Really?
oh, hell yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
That does not strike, none of that strikes me as odd at all. And I saw it during the research called out, like, just so many things that there's no way she was going for a weekend. And I'm like, have you never traveled with a woman?
Uh-huh.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, you're out in the middle of freaking nowhere and you're like, oh, damn it, I forgot this totally obscure thing. And if you're with a woman, she's like, oh, I got
it.
I got it. Yeah, I'll dig it out.
Yeah.
So to me, it just doesn't strike me as at all odd.
We plan for all possible problems.
And every potential clothing need,
Yes.
like shorts in the middle of the wintertime and
Because you sleep in them.
parkas in the middle of the summer and yeah, whatever. I mean, don't get me started on that. But is all I'm saying is it just doesn't strike me.
And we
all
plan
that
for
odd.
people who are with us that might have not planned for themselves.
Right. But when you read that list in that
Mm-hmm.
mindset, to me, it just doesn't strike me as odd. It seems like a woman that's packed pretty damn light, honestly, for a weekend. And unbelievably light for I'm leaving for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Never coming back.
21 years at least.
Yeah. So, but add to that list that you talked about a full lineup of hygiene products, Head and Shoulders shampoo, Herbal Essences shampoo, good, Got to Be Good and Bonbons products, a tube of Colgate, a travel toothbrush, deodorant, a razor, multiple body sprays, at least 1 pack of birth control pills, partially used with 4 pills missing. It's a level of preparation that maybe raises eyebrows. To me, it doesn't. But a lot of people have said, boy, that's a lot of stuff. It's not just an overnight trip. We're talking about enough hygiene and grooming products to last weeks, possibly longer. These are people that are men or have never been married, or both, because, like, again, I have had this conversation with women in my life. Why do you need 6 bottles of shampoo to go for a weekend?
I don't take that much.
Some women do.
I know. I'm just saying I don't, so I can't answer that.
I mean, there's women that like will wash their hair with one kind of shampoo for this and another shampoo for that. Or
that's true.
I mean, none of this is that strange to me. And maybe it's just because I've been around women a lot in my life, but I'm always the one carrying the suitcase, and you pick it up and you're like, oh my God, I've got a hernia. Trip is canceled. Take me to the hospital. So to me, it just isn't, nothing about this screams. This is so weird. But anyway, I digress. We will move on. I have a hard time keeping my opinions to myself.
I love it though.
So
I can't even now. That's where the odd details from X come into play. Oh, I cannot wait. Someone noticed that Maura had an empty cellophane pouch, possibly from cigarettes. Now, Maura wasn't a known smoker, but it opens up questions. Was it hers? Was it someone else's? Could it suggest a shared space, shared planning? There's also the head and shoulders, commonly marketed to men. That doesn't prove anything, but combined with the cellophane pouch and multiple toiletries, it hints that these items might not have all been intended for one person. Was there someone else traveling with her or waiting for her?
And one thing that we will get into, it won't be in this episode, but it will come up, that witnesses claim that a man was seen in her car smoking a cigarette.
Okay.
Before she disappeared. So one of the witnesses looked out the window and saw a woman outside the car and a man inside the car smoking a cigarette. So there is that. And then there's the practical gear: Fix-A-Flat, a Lumaseal, STP power steering fluid, a radiator funnel, a tire gauge, a magnetic can opener, multiple screwdrivers. These aren't luxury items. These are what someone takes when they expect to rely on themselves, when they might need to make repairs, open cans, or solve problems on the fly. But it also is something that a daughter would have in her car because her dad puts together a little kit in case something happens.
Yep.
So it doesn't,
especially this daughter that wrecks her car all the time.
Right. And, you know, Fred really strikes me as just the kind of guy that would do something like this. I mean, he gave her the hint about sticking the rag in the tailpipe, and I could see him putting together a little bag of, you know, little tools and supplies to carry in her car.
Yeah.
I've taught all my kids that you carry tools in your vehicle with you in case you need something, in case something goes wrong. So to me, it doesn't say, and maybe it's just the way that we grew up out here in the West, like this is normal, and we travel long distances for everything and distances across no man's land.
Yeah, we don't ask how many miles away something is. We ask how many minutes or hours something is. Yeah.
And so, you know, maybe this isn't really common to city dwellers. I don't know. But to me, there's nothing at all strange about having a few tools and automotive supplies in your car.
Right.
Especially a car that's a pile of shit.
Right.
And that you're having technical issues with. Right. So, but let's not forget the snacks and the drinks. We've got Twizzlers, Diet Cherry Coke, a jar of pickles, like you said, gum. There's comfort there.
About it.
But there's also evidence of someone maybe provisioning for the road. These weren't fancy items. They were efficient, high in sodium, high in sugar, the kind of stuff you eat when you don't know when your next meal is coming.
And among the deeply personal items, a photograph of Curtis Murray, makeup, tampons, a portable JVC CD player, and 34 CDs. A cassette of U2, a Led Zeppelin tape, a small mirror, trip essentials, but also things that connect Maura to a world she might have been about to leave behind. And that detail, the printed email from Bill Rausch referencing relationship issues, left visible, that wasn't buried. It was placed where it could be found. Was it a message, a clue, or a goodbye?
And yet, one thing was very clearly missing. Maura's wallet, cell phone, credit cards, and backpack were never recovered. Those are the lifelines. The wallet and the phone, gone. The bag, gone. In a case like this, those missing items speak volumes. If you're running, those are the things you absolutely take. And that's exactly what she did. Some argue that the presence of so many personal items in the Saturn weakens the runaway theory. Why take shampoo but leave books? Why take makeup but leave nursing textbooks? But we have to look at it from a different angle. Maybe Maura packed only what she needed to start a new chapter: survival gear, identity concealment tools, and enough hygiene products to feel human while she figured things out.
One more thing that often gets overlooked: for use of multiple calling cards found in the car. This was 2004. Burner phones weren't common yet. Calling cards were the next best thing for staying off the grid, making calls without triggering traceable patterns. The fact that Maura had multiple cards, including prepaid ones, suggests some planning in that direction too.
Yeah, maybe. And I saw that reported, but I also remember that time. I had so freaking many of them. And you remember you would get the little card that was like, dial this number and it's only 15 cents a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Dial this one, it's 10 cents a minute, or what. I mean,
yep.
You know, you carried a lot of those, and it was damn hard to make a freaking long distance phone call without calling cards. I mean, you had to call the operator, and then you used to do a credit card charge.
Mm-hmm.
To the operator. So you call the operator would pick up, and you'd say credit card, and then you'd give them the number, and then you'd have to give them your credit card. I mean, it was a freaking nightmare. For those of you too young to remember that,
yeah,
count yourself lucky, because that part sucked.
Yes.
So we have multiple hygiene products, including some gender neutral or maybe even masculine coded brands, a partially used pack of birth control, road maintenance supplies and car fix products, comfort items including snacks and music, calling cards, adapter cords, no visible phone, a missing wallet and backpack, a photograph left behind, and a printed email left in plain sight. This isn't a chaotic departure. It's deliberate, thorough, and multi-layered. It reflects someone who thought through the physical, emotional, and logistical dimensions of vanishing. And no, it's not conclusive, but it is consistent with someone who intended to disappear, not for a night, not for a week, but potentially for good.
And again, that doesn't mean we buy this theory wholesale. It means we look at this inventory and ask ourselves, if we were trying to vanish, is this what she'd bring? If she were trying to vanish, is this what she'd bring? And the answer is maybe yeah. We can't forget what was not found. No blood, no struggle, no third-party DNA, just a locked car full of very specific things. If this wasn't a crime scene, it may have been a launch pad.
So one of the loudest objections to the runaway theory comes from Maura Murray's own family, and it is a powerful one. Emotional, rooted in decades of searching, and echoed by every loved one who spent sleepless nights imagining what happened. The core of their argument is simple. She would not do this to us. She wouldn't just vanish. Not while her mother was sick, not when her siblings were actively checking in, not when her father Fred was helping her pick out a new car. To them, and to many in the public, those bonds are unbreakable. That silence would be unnatural.
It's one of the most human responses we've seen in a missing person case. The belief that Lev should be stronger than whatever pain someone's running from. But sometimes that pain is the family. And that's not an accusation. It's a pattern we've seen again and again in other cases. That's what makes this segment so hard. because we're not here to pass judgment on Maura's parents or siblings. We're here to understand how someone who seemed deeply connected might have felt so deeply alone.
There's a strong emotional logic to the argument that Maura wouldn't run. But the psychological literature and survivor accounts offer a more complicated truth. Many disappearances, especially among women in their teens and 20s, involve individuals who appear high functioning but are carrying an unbearable private burden. People who excel at suppressing emotion, who default to silence, who manage their world through perfectionism and control until the system breaks. In 2023, a Reddit thread resurfaced the possibility that Maura had experienced some form of emotional control within her family. Not abuse necessarily, but a household that prized high achievement and outward appearances. These claims weren't documented, but they echoed themes seen in similar cases. Several commenters described being from high-pressure families where failure wasn't an option. One user wrote, quote, "I didn't tell my parents I was depressed until I was 28. I thought disappointing them would be worse than dying." It's an anecdote, but one that aligns with broader patterns in forensic psychology.
And let's be honest here. When you layer in everything else going on in Maura's life, you don't need a smoking gun to imagine how she felt cornered. She had just wrecked her dad's car, over maybe $10,000 in damage. She was still technically on probation for a credit card fraud case. She was probably embarrassed, stressed, emotionally raw from that February 5th call at work. And if you're already used to internalizing stress to keeping things private, then yeah, maybe a solo escape starts to look more rational than calling your mom or your sister.
That brings us to something many experts call the collapse of identity. It's not necessarily a breakdown. It's more like a slow erosion of what you think your life is supposed to be. In Maura's case, there was her exit from West Point, a disciplined environment where she was thriving academically. Because of the theft at Fort Knox, that wasn't just a setback. That was a fracture in who she thought she was. She left in silence without explaining herself to most of her friends and started over at UMass. Same pattern. From there, things kept snowballing. The relationship with Bill Rausch, by all accounts, had some strain at least. The credit card incident was behind her, but it left a mark, and she kept it all close to the chest. Even when things were unraveling in February 2004, she didn't vent. She didn't overshare. She quietly emailed professors to say there'd been a death in the family. She packed up her room, removing posters and art from her dorm walls, and she just left.
A lot of what we're describing tracks with voluntary disappearance profiles. And I know that phrase sounds clinical, but psychologists have been studying these types of vanishings for decades. Women in particular are often driven not by the desire to hurt others, but by the need to escape shame or loss of control. A 2009 study published in Psychiatry, Psychology, and Law looked at cases where women staged disappearances or fled their lives. The most common motivators were emotional exhaustion, fear of public humiliation, and the need to reset their identity somewhere far away. Maura checks several boxes: high performer, isolated stress, a triggering event, and a strong ability to mask her emotions in front of friends and family. In fact, one roommate later said she had no idea anything was wrong.
That silence is what makes the runaway theory compelling and infuriating. If she told no one, it means there was something she believed couldn't be spoken. And whether it was tied to her relationship, her future as a nurse, or something that we don't know, that speaks to emotional suppression, not selfishness. So let's acknowledge something else. When someone disappears and they don't come back, it's tempting to frame that as a failure of love, but it might be a failure of belief. belief that things can get better, belief that people will understand, and belief that the world still has room for you, even if you've messed up.
And here's something chilling. Studies of people who've disappeared and then returned or were found reveal that most never planned to stay gone forever. Some just wanted to escape the pressure cooker. Others thought a few days away would help, but once the world moved on and the news picked up their story, or guilt piled up. They felt like they couldn't come back and that they were too far gone. That could have happened to Maura. If she did leave with the intention to return, maybe that window closed quickly. The longer she stayed gone, the harder it would have been to explain, especially if she was ashamed or afraid of consequences.
The psychology of disappearance doesn't exist in a vacuum. It intersects with family, with upbringing, with personal beliefs about forgiveness. Maura's family, and I mean this with full empathy, may have unintentionally been a factor, not through anything malicious, but through a culture of expectations. We know from multiple reports that her father pushed her to succeed and that Maura admired him deeply. That dynamic can be both empowering and crushing, especially when things go wrong. And it adds emotional weight to what journalist James Renner suggested in his writings. Let me be crystal clear. We do not endorse his extreme whack job bullshit theories, especially the claim that Maura ran away because of abuse from her father. That's not supported by evidence, and it's a serious accusation that deserves a higher standard of proof than speculation. But what Renner got right, at least in terms of psychological plausibility, is that Maura may have felt trapped between who she was and who everyone else expected her to be.
That's why the silence isn't just eerie. It might have been protective. If she believed no one would understand or that she couldn't survive another failure, then disappearing could have seemed like mercy, like relief. Not from the people she loved, but from the pressure to be perfect for them.
And that's the paradox that we're left with. If Maura did run away, it's likely because she felt she couldn't stay, not because she didn't love her family. In fact, it may have been precisely because she loved them that she couldn't bear to disappoint them any further. So, as we move forward, we'll keep unpacking this theory, the car, the emails, the digital trail, the forensic silences, but this human piece, the emotional terrain, it matters just as much, because for someone to leave everything behind, there has to be a storm inside that no one else can see. It's easy to forget now. 2 decades into a world of smartphones, biometric security, AI facial recognition, and 24/7 digital surveillance, that Maura Murray disappeared in 2004. That's a critical detail in any conversation about whether she could have successfully vanished by choice, because if she did walk away, she did it at the tail end of the last era when you could. Before everything you touched left a trail, before disappearing required navigating algorithms and camera grids and IRS databases. And there's a precedent for it. Multiple cases before and even shortly after Maura's disappearance show that walking away, even without a perfect plan, was not only possible, but sometimes frighteningly easy.
Right. And if you're under 30, it might sound like science fiction, but back in 2004, you could board a Greyhound bus with cash and no ID, rent a room with only a name and a smile. You didn't need a social media footprint to function socially. You could go off the grid without raising instant red flags.
So let's talk about a few examples. Probably the most frequently cited is Brooke Henson, a young woman from South Carolina who went missing in 1999. Years later, someone using her identity resurfaced. not because Brooke had returned, but because another woman had stolen her identity to start a new life. That imposter applied to Columbia University under Brooke's name. It wasn't until a background check flagged the inconsistency that anyone caught on. In the years before that, she'd worked jobs, filed taxes, and passed as a completely different person. The real Brooke, still missing. What that case shows is the systemic loopholes that existed in identity verification. Maura didn't need to become someone else. She just needed to disappear as herself before the system could notice.
And then there's Elizabeth Greenwood. In 2004, she wasn't a missing person, but years later, she staged her own disappearance as part of a book project. She wanted to know, could you fake your own death in a modern world? The answer, surprisingly, was yes. She flew to the Philippines, paid a fixer, forged death paperwork, and came back with a certificate saying she died in a car accident. She later wrote about the process in her book, Playing Dead, and it showed how, even well into the 2010s, with money, guts, and the right timing, you could disappear.
Greenwood's experiment draws a direct line to what Maura might have done, though without the death certificate. She may not have wanted to fake a death so much as to erase her current life. And unlike someone staging insurance fraud or trying to escape law enforcement, Maura had relatively little to fear from authorities. That made her less likely to be pursued aggressively and more likely to be written off as a voluntary disappearance, which is exactly what happened. And of course, we can't talk about case comparisons without bringing up Tanya Ryder. Though her case flips the theory. Tanya went missing in Washington State in 2007, and it took 8 days for police to begin a proper search because they thought she'd ran away voluntarily. The truth? She'd been trapped in her car after a crash the entire time, and alive for it. She was finally rescued, barely clinging to life. The case showed just how dangerous it is when authorities assume someone left willingly.
That assumption that a young woman has left to escape her life becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Resources dry up, leads go cold, and it makes someone like Maura all the more vulnerable, whether she was trying to vanish or needed help.
Which brings us back to the moment in history. In 2004, surveillance infrastructure was limited. New Hampshire had no traffic cameras on Route 112. The local bus systems didn't log passenger manifests. Border crossings into Canada weren't tracked as rigorously as they are today. There was no Real ID Act yet. Even Social Security tracking was primitive. That's crucial. It means that if Maura planned to vanish, or even if she just made the decision impulsively, she had an unusually good chance of succeeding, at least in the short term. There were no alerts going to national travel agencies, no integration of license plate readers, no GPS logs from cell towers beyond rudimentary triangulation. And most cell phones, they didn't even have GPS.
Right. Maura's Sprint cell phone, if she had it with her, wouldn't have been pinging towers in the way we think about today. The data just didn't exist or wasn't retained. Even the banks were slow to respond. Her debit card had one final transaction at an ATM, $280 withdrawn in cash. After that, nothing, no digital footprint.
And the silence in 2004 didn't mean the same thing that it means today. You could survive without being traceable. There wasn't this expectation of constant connectivity. No Find My iPhone, no Instagram check-ins. You could disappear and people would just wait for a phone call. And if the call never came, they had nothing to go on. That's why so many people cite the era itself as a kind of accomplice to Maura's disappearance. If she ran, she picked the right moment, and the world, technologically speaking, wasn't built to stop her.
It's one of the biggest what-ifs in this entire case. What if Maura had waited even 6 months? What if cameras had been installed, or digital toll passes had been mandatory? What if you had to swipe a license or passport at a hotel? There are so many modern day tools that could have tracked her, but they just didn't exist yet.
So our buddy James Renner, who's done years of work on Maura's case, has leaned very hard into this point. He's proposed that Maura may have traveled with a tandem driver, possibly a friend, a stranger, or someone she met online, and that together they coordinated her exit. He cited an incident involving a record store clerk in Canada who believed she saw Maura years after her disappearance. The woman initially identified her from a photograph, but when shown an age-progressed image, a more realistic depiction of what Maura would have looked like at that point, she said that it was definitely not the same person.
That kind of near miss can be maddening. It's just plausible enough to make you hope, but not strong enough to close the case.
Yeah, and after the last episode, you all know how I feel about James Renner.
A little bit.
Yeah, you ought to. And, like the record store thing, I think was absolute dishonesty. You don't go up there, and it could have just been he not knowing what the hell he's doing, because, he's not any kind of investigator or anything. So maybe he just was dumb. I don't know. But you don't...
It's the nicest thing you've said about him.
You don't go with a picture, 15, 20 years after somebody disappeared. You don't go with a picture of what they look like back then and say, have you seen this person? Unless you're completely out of your mind, there can't be an expectation that somebody's going to look at that picture and say, oh, yeah, I remember 25 years ago, this person walked into my, you've got to go with something that's at least the best guess of what this person looks like now.
Yeah.
And he didn't.
Yeah.
And as soon as they contacted this clerk with a photograph that was age progressed, she said, no, not only was that not her, if I would have been showing this photo, I never would have said it was her.
Oh, gotcha.
And let's be honest, Maura is not an unusual, and I'm not the one that's making this up, actually. It was the guys from the Missing Maura podcast that really said this, and they get full credit for it, but she was not an unusual looking girl. Like they said, you could probably go down the street and find 10 girls that look like her. Cute young girls with dimples when they smile. That's Maura Murray. And so this idea that somebody's going to pick her out from a picture,
20 years ago?
Yeah, it's just absurd. So, but you know how I feel about James Renner, but his name is woven into so much of this case that we just have to discuss it. Renner's theory, while provocative, also includes claims that have sparked deep criticism. Like we said, he suggested with absolutely zero evidence that she was fleeing her abusive father. There's no documented proof to support that. There's no police reports, no confessions, nothing. So, but we can't leave his name out of the story as much as I would like to, because the guy has done a shit ton of investigation into this story. We cannot say that he hasn't done the legwork, because he has.
Yeah.
And he's one of the ones that's probably done the most investigation into this. And so I think it's irresponsible to just throw out everything that he says, because some of what he says is bullshit. There could be some kernels of truth to some of this too. So that's that. So it's hard to overstate how much the world has changed since Maura Murray vanished in 2004. It's hard to even believe that how much this world has changed in the last 20 years. It's insane. In terms of personal privacy, digital surveillance, and our relationship to data, it's a completely different universe. If Maura disappeared today, 20 years later, could she do it in the same way? Could anyone? That question matters because it shapes how we interpret the runaway theory in hindsight. It also defines whether similar disappearances could ever happen again.
The short answer is probably not. Not the same way. Not with the same odds. Today you leave a trace even when you don't try to. Disappearing now requires a level of sophistication, tech avoidance, and sheer luck that most people just don't have. In 2025, the system is always watching, sometimes even when we don't know it.
So let's break it down. In 2004, Maura had a Sprint cell phone with no GPS. She used MapQuest printouts to plan routes, withdrew cash from an ATM that had no exterior surveillance camera, and drove a car that couldn't be tracked remotely. That's not science fiction, it's just 2004. But fast forward to today, let's say Maura was alive and trying to disappear now. She'd be facing a minefield.
Yeah, start with cell phones. Every modern phone logs GPS data constantly, even in airplane mode depending on device settings. Apps track behavior, location, spending, motion, even who you're near. If Maura had an iPhone, Apple's Find My network could still ping her location using other devices nearby. Even if she ditched her phone, nearby cameras would pick up her face.
Exactly. Facial recognition systems are embedded in everything from street cameras to retail stores to public transportation. Some major cities have police integrated license plate readers that can scan thousands of cars per minute. If Maura had a new vehicle, it would be digitally connected through like OnStar or Uconnect or similar platforms, transmitting location data back to the manufacturer or insurance companies. Even walking down a remote road today might not offer the same anonymity. Private security cameras, dash cams, and drones capture footage across places that used to be dark zones.
And that's just the hardware. The digital trail is worse. Want to pay for a hotel room? Even if you use cash, most places require a photo ID. And many scan it straight into a central system. Want to apply for work? That's a background check, social security verification, and facial ID in the payroll system. Even renting under the table can trigger red flags if your name is associated with a credit check or utilities registration.
There's also the psychology of the internet. In 2004, you could walk away from your life and no one would say, wait, why didn't she post anything on Instagram? Social silence was normal. Today, if you vanish from text threads, dating apps, social media, it immediately raises alarms, which is why I don't social media. I don't want nobody knowing my shit. And if I want to disappear, ain't nobody saying John ain't posted, because they'll be saying John ain't posted in like the last, I don't know. It's probably been.
But you share the dark dialogue posts now.
I share the dark dialogue posts, but as far as like posting, I don't know. I think the last time would have maybe been when I took the kids to a Renaissance festival. So probably almost 10 years ago.
Goodness sake.
Like that. I don't. Anyway.
To that point, though, I have a friend that I hadn't seen post in a month today, and finally I reached out to her actual cell phone. I was like, dude, you okay? Like...
It is a thing.
Yeah.
Most normal people, not like me. Most normal people, this is a real thing. And algorithms notice, friends notice. AI-powered search engines pick up anomalies in posting habits and flag accounts for inactivity.
Plus, there's the evolution of law enforcement tools. Investigators today use real-time data access from EasyPass records to Uber history to Wi-Fi logins to track movement with uncanny precision. Why was that word hard? If Maura's disappearance happened today, the whole thing could have been traced in hours. Her route, her stops, her cell tower handoffs, possibly even audio from home assistants or smart devices in the places she visited.
And let's not forget border surveillance. In 2004, Maura could have crossed into Canada without a passport, without much of anything, really. In 2025, facial scans are used at most major border checkpoints. RFID chipped IDs are required, and cameras track foot traffic, not just vehicles. And you do have to have a passport to get into Canada. Now, I don't know. I think that they still allow you to walk across. I'm almost positive that they do. Like up in Niagara Falls, I'm almost positive you can walk across to the Canadian side and do your shopping and mess around over there and stuff and come back. But to drive across, you have to have a passport.
Okay.
So that's not to say that someone can't disappear now. People do it, but to do it successfully in 2025 requires expert level knowledge. You need to avoid not just surveillance, but people who know how to trace it. You need cash sources, transportation that's off grid, no digital communication, and above all, you need to never make a mistake.
It turns the Maura Murray case into kind of a time capsule, a reminder that there was this small window in modern history, a sliver of time between the analog and digital eras. While walking away didn't require cyber erasure or darknet tricks, it just took a quiet moment, a little luck, and a world that hadn't yet learned to notice your absence.
And that's important because it doesn't mean Maura's story is replicatable today. If she did run, her success may be due in large part to the year that it happened, to the fact that no camera caught her, no data pinged after the crash, no security system flagged her movements. Those absences weren't strategic, they were circumstantial. Which brings us back to how we interpret this theory in the present. The feasibility of the runaway theory in 2004 is not the same thing as the feasibility now. So when people ask, why hasn't anyone seen her? The answer might be because of the timing. Because if she succeeded in leaving back then, she's protected by the last era when people could still become ghosts.
But if she didn't run, then the silence becomes more chilling. Because with everything we have now, the surveillance, the databases, the amateur investigators online, it's almost impossible to believe that nothing concrete has emerged. If she was harmed, you'd expect a sign. If she's alive, you'd expect a slip. And yet, nothing.
That's the paradox that haunts this case. If she ran, she pulled it off at exactly the right time. If she didn't, the tools that we now rely on to solve cases may have arrived too late. It's a ghost story built on a technological fault line.
And it's one we're still trying to decipher 2 decades later.
If there's one thing that defines the runaway theory in Maura Murray's case, it's this: planning. Every piece of physical evidence, every choice Maura made in the final days before her disappearance, right down to the gaps in surveillance technology available in 2004, leans in that direction. But speculation only gets us so far. In this final stretch of the analysis, we ask one question: could it have worked? The logistics matter. We're not talking about a spur-of-the-moment dash into the woods. We're talking about a 21-year escape plan that began with careful calculation and continued with silence that, if Maura is still alive, has held to this day. So, what were the real-world mechanics? Could someone in her situation, in that rural corridor of northern New Hampshire, have pulled off a clean break? Let's start with her financial and technological preparation. Maura withdrew $280 from her account on the afternoon of February 9th. That was almost everything that she had. To most people in 2025, that number seems absurdly low. Barely enough for a hotel night in most cities, but in 2004, in a cash economy, it was more than enough to stay off the radar for a few days, especially in rural lodging that didn't require identification for check-in. As we know, she was making inquiries Maura placed two notable calls, one to a Bartlett, New Hampshire condo at 12:55 and another to a Stowe, Vermont lodging facility at 2:05 p.m. These weren't random. They suggest she had specific destinations in mind. Both locations were remote, reachable by side roads, and offered off-season pricing for long-term stays.
And remember, no cell tower data tracked her. 2004 was a different world. GPS wasn't automatically tied to every device. And prepaid calling cards were a go-to option for people who didn't want their calls traced. According to that detailed item list we reviewed, Maura had multiple calling cards in her Saturn. One was issued by MCI, another by TTI National. That matters. They gave her the ability to make anonymous calls from any landline without pinging cell towers or logging into a personal account.
Exactly. She had privacy, and more importantly, she had the tools to maintain it. That includes the birth control found in her car, with 4 pills missing, and an array of hygiene products, including multiple shampoos, deodorants, body spray, and sleeping aids. Not just one kind of shampoo, not just one toothbrush. She packed in layers. Victoria's Secret lotion, cucumber melon spray, multiple travel items. These weren't haphazard. They suggest an intent to maintain her physical comfort and identity, at least for a little while, on the move. Even the vehicle itself may have played a role. Some theories suggest that she intended to crash the Saturn near a bend on Route 112. It's a busy night.
Yeah.
Even
gonna stay here.
No kidding. Even the vehicle itself may have played a role. Some theories suggest she intended to crash the Saturn near a bend on Route 112, perhaps as a distraction. The rag in the tailpipe, explained later by her father Fred as a way to prevent the car from smoking, added ambiguity. What matters for this theory is that Maura packed it herself. She took the car north. She controlled where and how it stopped. But what about the escape? That's the core logistical question. How could she vanish from the scene? Well, the dog trail helps us here. A canine search led from the Saturn east along Route 112, then abruptly ended 100 yards away. No scent into the woods, no blood, no body, no struggle. That's textbook pickup zone. If she had a tandem driver, someone that she coordinated with in advance, this would have been the meet point. A place with no cameras, no witnesses, no street lights, a perfect gap. Now, critics say there's no proof of a second car was ever there, but no tire impressions, no confirmed sightings, and that's true. But the failure to canvass the area extensively for passing vehicles, the lack of roadblocks, the absence of security footage from local businesses left that door wide open. If she got in a car at 7:30 that night and headed west or north, there'd be no way to trace her. Especially not in Canada.
Let's talk about that, because back in 2004, passports weren't required to cross into Canada. That didn't change until 2007. At the time, all she would have needed was a driver's license or even a student ID in many locations. Border patrol between Vermont and Quebec was relaxed, to say the least. If she wanted to vanish internationally, that was one of the best spots in the U.S. to do it.
That possibility was floated by Renner in 2006 when he claimed a record store clerk that we already talked about had seen her out there. That lead went cold because it was bullshit for the reasons I already said, but Renner didn't stop there. He also claimed, without evidence, that Maura was running from her abusive father, which is, again, absolute bullshit, but we've already covered enough about that douchebag, so
we move on. It crossed a line, and in hindsight, that kind of speculation distracts from the real question. Could Maura Murray have vanished by design? And would 2004 have allowed it? In a way, 2025 never could.
Of course, if the runaway theory held up perfectly, this case might not still haunt so many people. The cracks in the idea are just as important as the support beams, and that's where we need to shift our focus, because for every piece of evidence that points toward planning, there's a human counterweight: the grief of a family left behind, the strain of silence, and the very real pain caused by speculation that's gone too far.
This theory that Maura ran away isn't just controversial because it's unconventional. It's controversial because of what it implies. It asks us to believe that a bright, driven, loyal young woman could disappear into the night and never call home again. That she could hear about her mother's worsening cancer and say nothing. That she could watch the search efforts grow nationwide, see her sister Julie speak to the press, witness her father Fred organize search parties without ever reaching out.
And that's the first major challenge in the runaway theory: the absence of any confirmed sightings. Not one bank withdrawal, no confirmed photos, no video footage, no credible employment records. In the 21 years since she vanished, the only reported sighting that gained any traction was that Canadian record store incident. And that, as we said earlier, fell apart when the witness saw the age-progressed photo and recanted. Whatever happened to Maura, she didn't leave a breadcrumb trail. And for many, that's not proof of success. It's proof that she did not leave voluntarily.
Then there's the emotional argument, the one we can't quantify. The one you hear in Fred Murray's voice during interviews or in the eyes of Maura's siblings when they talk about her. The family has said repeatedly, she wouldn't do this. She was close to her mother, she checked in often with friends and relatives, and she had future plans: school, nursing, a new car. Her dorm wasn't emptied out, it was just tidy. Her personal items weren't disposed of. They were still there. So many clues that she planned to come back.
Or maybe they just seem like clues. That's the hard part. The longer this case has stayed open, the more our interpretations shift. In 2004, most missing adults were assumed to have vanished voluntarily unless proven otherwise. Today, the pendulum, luckily, has begun to swing in the other direction, and we tend to assume danger or foul play unless we see direct evidence of planning. But this evolution of how we interpret missing persons' behavior brings us to something deeper and more urgent: the ethical responsibility of anyone investigating, reporting, or speculating on these cases. So, where does this leave us? If we pull together every thread, every motel call, every MapQuest search, every silence that followed, the runaway theory is possible. Not confirmed, not even likely in the eyes of many, but possible. Maura Murray had the intelligence, the resources, and perhaps the motive to disappear. She was under enormous pressure, facing multiple personal stressors, and moving through life like someone searching for an escape hatch. But possibility is not proof.
It's also not peace. The theory may offer a framework, but it doesn't close the wound. If Maura did choose to vanish, she left behind people who loved her. People who searched rivers and climbed mountains and opened their lives to scrutiny, all for a daughter and sister they refused to give up on. That's the collateral damage of this idea.
And that's why we examine it so carefully, not to promote it, not to dismiss it, but to test it. Because whether Maura ran or something far darker happened, the facts deserve the light. With that said, I can't buy this theory for a second. I think it is absolute bullshit that would require so many factors to align perfectly that it becomes improbable, if not completely impossible.
Now let's shift our focus back to Maura as a person. Not just a theory, not just a mystery, but a full human life that mattered. Join us as we pay tribute to the woman at the center of it all, in a story that still echoes across the White Mountains.
So before we jump into the victim tribute section, let's do a pulse check. So where are you at with this? We've covered James Renner, and this is our first real dive into the theory, but we laid it all out in episode 1. So where are you at with it all?
I don't feel like she did it on purpose. Even with all of the abilities that 2004 afford and 2025 doesn't afford, it's still 21 years. We've said it. We've beat it to death. I don't believe it. I just don't.
And so a couple of things that, I think about is, number one, if you're bailing on life, why do you email your professors and say there's been a death?
You just go.
And, I know a lot of people are like, well, it would buy her some more time. Okay, these are people that were never in college and never sat in a college classroom and looked at a professor that couldn't give two shits if you were there or not.
Mm-hmm.
These are people that went to high school that called your mommy when you didn't show up. Colleges don't do that shit.
Not big colleges. Little colleges might, but this was a big college.
Maybe
Northwest might, but
I went to Northwest.
Yeah.
There isn't no freaking professor at Northwest that's going to call anybody if my ass wasn't in class. They don't care. You're paying for it. If you don't want to be there, you don't have to be there.
That's true.
I mean, maybe if you had like a really close relationship with the professor, then they would be like, okay, this is this is not normal.
Mm-hmm.
But most professors, I mean, I sat in some like stadium classrooms when you were in there with, I don't know, 200 or 300 other people,
mm-hmm.
and the professors don't even know you.
Yeah.
Like if you set up a meeting to go talk to them, you have to explain who you are, what class they don't know you.
Yeah. Your number.
You're just a number.
Yeah.
And so that I bring that up. Why do you email your professors? Well, you email them so that you can make up your exams or whatever you're
mm-hmm.
going to miss when you come back to class.
Yeah.
That's the only reason that I can think of that you're going to email your professors.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're going to skip high school, you're probably going to call in and say you're sick or something like that. College, they don't give a shit.
Mm-mm.
But they're also extremely strict about deadlines.
Yeah.
Again, not like high school where you might be able to go to your professor to your teacher and say, oh, can I turn in my test or can I do? In college, they're like, no, you weren't here. Get your ass out of here. I don't even know who the hell you are.
Yeah.
Go away. And then the other big question that comes to my mind is, why does she have textbooks in her car?
Mm-hmm.
If she's leaving her life.
Why would she still want to learn?
Yeah, I mean, even if she planned on continuing a nursing program somewhere else down the line, I mean, you're not going to have your textbooks and homework and shit with you. That stuff is going to be left.
Mm-hmm.
To me, when I read that list, when I was going through the list in her car, I was thinking, okay, if I'm leaving, most of this is shit I'm leaving in my dorm room.
Yeah.
Because I'm never coming back to school.
Yeah.
I'm not packing up all
deal with it.
Heavy ass books and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm taking the necessities and I'm bailing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so just one last thing that I really want to bring attention to, and that is, in this episode, we made the insinuation that Fred really pushed her to succeed and all this kind of stuff. And those accusations have been made. I felt that it was important to include them because there could be a causation there. But I also will say that Fred has vehemently denied that. And so has Julie, her sister. Both of them have said, no, I mean, he ran track. He ran like marathons and stuff like that. And the girls admired what he was doing, and so that's how they got into track. And he didn't push them, but he encouraged them. I just never got the impression at all from interviews. I saw an interview with her brother. I saw an interview with Kathleen, and I saw an interview with Julie. And then I've seen multiple interviews with Fred. And I didn't get that impression from any of them. Matter of fact, every one of them was just unequivocal. No, he was not like that. And so, although we said it, I just wanted to bring that out, that I don't think that that was the case at all. I don't think that he was pushing her. And
yeah.
So, but with that, we can now move on to the tribute. So we've spent a lot of time this episode breaking down timelines, inventory lists, psychological profiles, and forensic gaps. We've examined the theory, counter theory, and all the uncomfortable space in between. But here, at the end of this chapter, we return to what should have always been at the center of this story, Maura Murray herself. Maura wasn't just the subject of Reddit threads or the focus of online documentaries. She wasn't just a silhouette in a blurry photograph or the name attached to half a dozen theories. She was a daughter, a sister, a student, and an athlete. She was a young woman standing at the edge of adulthood, trying to build a life, even as the weight of stress and uncertainty threatened to pull her under. Born May 4th, 1982, Maura was the fourth of 5 children raised in Hanson, Massachusetts. Her family described her as smart, competitive, and quiet, but with a quietness that didn't mean absence. She absorbed things deeply. She thought before she spoke. When she did speak, her words had weight. Those who knew her best say she had a wry sense of humor and could be fiercely loyal once she let you in. She wasn't just book smart. She was driven. She ran track with everything that she had, pushing her body past its limits. She got into West Point because she earned it, and she stayed there through hazing, through hardship, until that one mistake at Fort Knox shifted the direction of her life. That moment, stealing a small amount of makeup from the Fort Knox commissary, has been dissected endlessly, but like so many moments in Maura's story, it's best understood not in isolation, but as part of a larger, more complicated picture. She was young, under pressure, maybe testing limits, maybe breaking under them. The point isn't what she took. The point is that after she was caught, she didn't collapse. She recalibrated. She shifted gears. She moved to UMass Amherst and took up nursing. She got a job. She made new friends. She started over. That ability to start over, the resilience it takes to begin again, is something we often overlook when we tell stories about missing people. We focus on the moment that they vanished, the phone call not answered, the car left behind, but long before that moment, there is often a pattern of reinvention. And Maura, like many young adults finding their way, was no stranger to reinvention. We've talked about the challenges she faced in the months leading up to February 2004, the accident with her father's car, the stress of nursing clinicals, the call that left her in tears on February 5th, the probation over the credit card charges, the MapQuest printouts, the emails, the dorm room that looked packed, ready. But we've also talked about her strength, her discipline, her ability to compartmentalize. That same discipline that helped her become a standout runner and a cadet at West Point might also have been the same internal structure that held everything in, that kept her pain sealed behind a composed exterior. She was struggling, she was trying, and maybe she was planning something we still don't fully understand. Here's what we do know. Maura had a life. She had people who loved her. Her father Fred searched for her in the woods. Her sister Julie became an advocate, keeping her name in the press and fighting for answers. Her friends never stopped asking what happened. For them, she wasn't a case. She was family. And whether she ran or didn't, whether she made it far or not far at all, none of that changes the fact that someone is missing. That there is a hole in a family, that a chair sat empty at her mother's funeral, that years have passed, and in all that time, there has been no confirmation, no sighting, and no return. Maura should have had more time to stumble, time to get back up, time to be young and wild and messy and human, time to love someone, time to forgive herself, time to call home, time to say, I'm all right, I just needed space. Or maybe time to say, I'm not okay, please help. That is the tragedy. No matter what theory you believe, that whatever she needed in that moment, space, escape, understanding, protection, she had to go looking for it alone. That's where somewhere between the school hallways and the snowy woods of New Hampshire, a young woman disappeared, not just from public eye, but from her own future. We don't know if Maura ran from something or towards something. We don't know if she ever made it to the destination that she imagined. What we do know is that she mattered, that her life, short as it may have been, echoed in more ways than most of us will ever know. When we say her name, we aren't just invoking a case file. We're invoking a person. One with fears, dreams, and flaws. One who deserved better than to become a question mark. So tonight, we pause, not on the theory board, but on the human story. We pause to honor Maura, not the missing woman, but the whole woman. Not the cold case, but the bright, complicated, striving soul who vanished too soon. We'll be back next week with a new episode digging into another possible theory in her disappearance. But for now, we leave you with this. Maura Murray was loved. Maura Murray was real. And until we know what happened, until we have truth, not theory, we will keep her memory alive, not just as a mystery, but as a woman who mattered.
That brings us to the end of Dark Dialogue, Echoes in the Pines, Part 2, The Runaway Theory. Whether you followed this case for years or are just discovering Maura's story, we want to thank you for listening with compassion and curiosity. If this episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with others who care about justice, truth, and the stories of those left behind. You can follow us on social media, Facebook, YouTube, and X at Dark Dialogue Pod, or visit our website at darkdialogue.com. Join the conversation, explore our archives, and contribute to ongoing discussions. We also invite you to support the show by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/darkdialoguepod, or buying us a coffee at coffee.com/darkdialogue. Your support helps keep these investigations alive, support new research, and ensures we can continue honoring the lives behind the headlines. If you know something about Maura Murray's disappearance, or have connections, ideas, or even just questions, we encourage you to reach out. Contact us at info@darkdialogue.com, or leave a voice message on our site. Every voice matters.
Next time on Dark Dialogue, we continue our series on Maura Murray by examining the death by exposure theory, the possibility that Maura became lost in the woods of New Hampshire and succumbed to the elements. It's one of the oldest and simplest explanations, but also one of the hardest to confirm. As always, we approach it not to prove anything, but to uncover the most complete truth that we can. Until then, hold your loved ones close. trust the evidence, and remember that silence doesn't mean absence. It means there's more to understand. I'm John.
And I'm Angela.
Keep searching, keep seeking, and keep the dialogue alive.